Please remain standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Well, we have a small agenda tonight, so we'll move on this just as soon as we can. Need to call the roll, please.
Mike Curtis.
Here.
Amber Brown. Jerry Sartain.
Here.
Joe Michoto. Gary Farley.
Here.
Renee Curtis.
Here.
Zane Cantrell.
Present.
We have a quorum.
You have the minutes before you of the last meeting. Are there any changes or additions to those minutes?
Move be approved, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion that be approved.
And second.
Have a second. Call the roll, please.
Mike Curtis.
Yes.
Amber Brown. Yes. Jerry Sartain.
Yes.
Gary Farley.
Yes.
Renee Curtis. Yes. Zane Cantrell.
Yes. All right, we have a request by Jeff Jensen, who is requesting a special exemption for a major home business, and this is a wood shop. What do you have on that, please?
Mic on.
Sorry, involves the property at 9155 Patterson Road. They are seeking special exception approval for the establishment of a major home-based business involving a wood shop located in the RL district. It's a 5.15 acre parcel, and it's currently used as a residential home. There are several outbuildings that the applicant is proposing to use, and the applicant is also proposing to move into the residence. At this time, he does not live there, but it is his intention. He is well aware that home-based businesses, the owner has to reside on the property. The current owner of the property contacted us. They had purchased the property, I believe, last year, and they were under the impression that the structures that were used for the business, it used to be Eagle Reclaimed Lumber. They did not know that that particular business was not permitted, and they wanted to utilize the buildings for the same type of work. And Mr. Jensen has this type of business, a wood fabrication shop, and he would like to use the existing structures for his home-based business. 3 structures will be used. The barn will be used as a main shop, a kiln shed, and a dry rack and staining building. Now, this dry rack and staining building you see in this corner, it kind of clips the property line. It extends beyond the property line. The owner of the property had tracked these parcels off, and when they deeded the property over to the current property owner, they gave them an easement for the benefit of the 5.15 acre parcel to be able to continue to use the structure for their benefit. And it is a concern of staff because, you know, we kind of like everybody's structures to be on their own property. If it's possible, we would like the applicant to approach the owner to maybe acquire enough to render the structure compliant with the side yard regulations, or modify the structure itself. It looks like it could be modified easily, but that was one of our conditions that if you approve it, we would like to see remedied. I was speaking with Tanya earlier, and a couple of the structures were erected, and it did not look like they have permits. In addition to the existing barn and the structure that I was just speaking about, we would definitely want those structures to be inspected and ensured that they're safe and meet building codes. The structures were built prior to the current owner wanting to use, purchasing the property, excuse me. So the applicant is proposing to work Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 5 p.m. They are proposing to have 8 employees and 8 business vehicles would be on site at any given time. Now, the applicant has read all of the conditions for major home-based businesses, and they've taken everything into consideration. They plan to install safety measures within the building to make sure everyone is, all the employees are safe and those using the facility are not in any danger. The issuance of building permits will be important for that, and I would ask that Tanya maybe explain some of the improvements that might be necessary for this specific use.
So when I looked in the records, the only thing that we had permitted from 1996, I believe, was the home itself. The structure, the large, long structure, part of that is an older barn that may have been erected as an agricultural building and then added to somewhere in the region of 2017, 2018, as well as the structure that clips the property line. The structure is fairly large, and with it being a woodworking shop, there is going to be some code requirements as well as fire code requirements that are going to have to happen depending on the layout and if there's any fire separation or anything in those buildings. Additionally, restrooms, bathrooms, plumbing, that kind of stuff, that's what we'd be looking for. And just make sure that the structure's safe.
Property lines that you have there, they're not surveyed, that's general.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
Do you know if is the building just too close, or is it actually
It
on the?
encroaches. The deed specifically states that this portion of property where that building stands on the adjacent property, they granted them an easement for that. I've not encountered that before, but
Is it like a mini barn that can be moved over, or is it a stick-built?
I've got some photos, and maybe the applicant can describe the structures better. It did not look like it had a slab, the drying structure, but, oh, let's see. That's the structure right here. So it looks like it could be easily moved, but then maybe they can. And I also, just for the purposes of showing that there has been this type of business operating in this area for years, I went back to our aerials, our pictometry, just to show you the evolution of this property and to demonstrate that it was used for business purposes. This is 2015. You can see a large wood pile back here. More things stored in the yard. And we never received complaints on the activities here. Tanya, can you recall any complaints in the past?
No, I believe the first time this came to our attention was when the existing homeowner came to Danielle to, he knew that he was going to need approval. I guess somebody had told him that he would need approval to run the business from his home. So the first time we heard of this was when he came to Danielle. He approached Danielle.
In 2019, well, you can see in 2017, the structure in question was constructed between 2016 and 17. And then in 2019, it shows the large addition to the old barn. And so in 2021, it looks like it was kind of cleaned up, but I'm imagining that the property owner, in preparation of selling the property, might have been ceasing business activity or closed the business. So here you go with just enlarged versions of.
Our regulations talk about having for home-based businesses, like, they're supposed to be kind of not seen.
Right.
And it talks about 3 maximum non-resident employees.
Now, the zoning regulations were amended, home-based business regulations were amended to allow the Board of Zoning Appeals the ability to go beyond that number of employees that you could consider
So
requests.
is this 3 not true anymore? I just went by what you put in their report. It's one thing to have 4.
So additional employees may be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals under specific standards for major home-based businesses. So they're limited to 3, but we amended 3 criteria in the last 2 years that granted you the authority to go beyond that on a case-by-case scenario.
Okay, to finish my question.
Okay.
Is there any concerns that recommended as 3, yes, we can approve more, but 8 employees is not a family business, small
Right.
home-based
And-
business. Is there any concern
And
about that?
it's possible that the applicant can provide some better explanation or context for how his business operates, but a lot of times when people apply for a home-based business, we tell them to ask for the maximum amount at any given time. So it may not be that he has 8 employees all the time on site, but that would be the maximum he could see being on site at any given time.
Have you given us all your?
Thank you.
Yes, we find that it meets the criteria with a few conditions, and I've kind of gone over that. We would like for the structures to be permitted and inspected by codes and fire department to make sure that all building and safety codes are met, that they continually comply with the provisions for major home-based businesses with the amendments that they are requesting, employees, cars, and that, and this may be, the applicant may be given additional time for this, that the applicant, property owner, acquires an area sufficient to render the dry rack and staining building entirely on the subject property, or modify the structure in a manner that it complies with the yard regulations for detached structures. And that concludes our presentation.
Any motion on this would include those 3 conditions, okay? Do we have anyone here representing this request? If you'll come around, please. Come around to the podium. You'll just give us your name and any additional information you'd like to share on this.
Sir. I'm Jeff Jensen. I'm the applicant. We are hoping to close on the property end of this month or first half of next month. And I had, my wife and I live across town. We were wanting to get back to the country where I'm from, where I feel best. I'm a trim carpenter and cedar carpenter, and I was renting a 1,500 square foot shop from Swanson and wanted to get to an ownership position, and my field supervisor went to wood sale that Mr. Hotbegger had one weekend, and he called me on Saturday. He said, hey, not only has this guy got some good deals on some wood, but he kind of feels like he might be wanting to sell the place if he got an offer. And so I said, man, that's a bit far out. And he said, you got to see the shop, though. And so my dad and brother had actually bought stuff from Eagle Reclaimed Lumber. My dad's a contractor, brother's a contractor. And so my brother knew the shop. I had never seen it. And I went out and looked at it, and I was like, this is perfect. I thought, well, this is great. It's an established wood shop. It's operated in the community for years as Eagle Reclaimed Lumber. They did, you can find online, they did several $100,000 worth of business in the calendar year out of there. And my dad would take, if my dad had Dad would find some slabs, and he'd take them out there and have them surface and stuff. So I thought, well, this is perfect. There's already a shop, 5,000 square feet's more than I'll ever need. I can get out of this 1,500 square foot shop, get into an ownership position instead of a renter position, and called Hanu, who Swanson had sold the shop to, and said, hey, I'm gonna get this shop over here. I'm gonna rent it from Ben until I get my, as a good small businessman, I'm always behind on my business taxes every year. And so I told Ben, I said, hey, I'll rent the shop from you until I can get my 2021 tax returns there for the bankers, and then we'll buy it. And let my shop in the industrial, down off Park Avenue, industrial area, Murfreesboro, go. And we moved all of our stuff out there. And then actually it was Mike Watson who sold the property to Ben a year ago, started talking about, oh, well, it's not supposed to be commercial. I'm like, well, okay, well, this is the fellow who was operating it as a commercial shop, much more with three-phase equipment, big heavy machinery that he was operating, and he's saying no commercial, and he's the neighbor. And I thought, well, okay, and so called Ben and said, hey man, he's complaining about us doing commercial stuff out of here, and we're just making shutters was what we were doing at the moment. And he goes, well, let me check. And he pulled up the original documents that he'd seen at the auction, and it advertised it as a workshop. And so I asked, I can't remember who I talked to, and maybe I called Danielle and Damasi. I'm not sure who I talked to first, but realized, okay, this thing was never permitted. It was never a legitimate workshop. Ben didn't know. Ben was thinking, he bought the shop from Eagle Reclaimed Lumber, and he's thinking he's got a workshop. And Ben didn't do much in there. Ben likes his slabs. He's got, if he needs slabs, he's the person to talk to. And so I said, man, I can't buy this property if I can't run my business out of it. That's just no good. And called Damasi, went and talked to Mr. Damasi, and he said, well, what are you wanting to do with it? And I said, I literally just want to do the same thing, and it's been done for the last, I don't know how many years, to a lesser degree. I don't have three-phase table saws and great big old, I don't have all that stuff. I've got stuff that I take to the job site, and it'd be nice to have something that stand there and not roll around, but we're not gonna be producing thousands of square feet of flooring like Eagle Reclaimed Lumber did for my dad. So I asked Mr. Damasi, well, what do I need to do to make this legitimate? And he said, well, are you going to live there? I said, no. Adam and Bree Fears are building a house, their custom house, they're builders, or he's a builder, she's a realtor. They're building their custom house across the street. And so they had already approached Ben about renting that house on the front of the property while they built their house. And Ben had kind of held off on that because he wasn't sure if he was selling the property. He didn't want to get into a situation and try to unload it on someone else. And so Ben and I talked about it. I said, man, that's great. My wife is in a wheelchair, and we just, she's been waiting for her concrete floors for years. And we live in a little bitty house, never wanted to stay there. But I finally looked at her a couple years ago and said, I'll make it work for you. You tell me what you want, we'll do what we can afford. So just last year, I finally stripped all the floors down, got all the carpet out. She's got concrete floors to roll around. She's happy as a lark to stay there. And I'm resigned that it's nice. I've trimmed it the way I want it. It's finally acceptable to me. So yes, ma'am. Oh.
I don't want to get lost in your story.
Yeah,
and I got
I'm sorry.
a couple
I do
questions
tend
on
to
that.
get
It's
long-winded.
okay. You're fine. It helps color in the picture a bit. But you said you're not going to be staying on the property, right? And am I understanding there's a place across the street that you're renting?
No.
Or it's some, okay, that's why I needed a little clarity, please.
I'm sorry. I did go a little long. Damasi was asking what my intentions were. He said, you're planning on living there, right? And I said, no. I just got my wife's concrete floors done. She wants to stay on her concrete floors. And told him the whole story that we've just got people who just rented it. They're building their house across the street, and we at least should let them stay there until they're done building their house. And then they had planned on moving their mother in so that grandma could live across the street from granddaughter. And he said, well, that's not what that's not what we do. We don't do special use permits unless you're living there. I said, okay. So I carried that information back home and said, probably not going to do this, not going to be able to unless we live there. And so she's willing to give up her concrete floors for us to move there whenever we need to. But that is something that I wanted. That is the only. I'm cool with inspections and permits. It was a cattle barn that was expanded by. It needs some stuff, and then I would like to bring it up to snuff as an actual commercial grade wood shop. and have all the outlets done right and all that stuff. But as far as living there, what would be the best is if the Fears can continue living there until they're done building their house across the street, because they already let their, before all this got uncovered, and I thought they'd be here tonight to tell the story too. But what would be best is if they can stay in that house until they're done building their house, or else they're going to have to figure out somewhere else to live for just a couple months. And then after that, we can move in. The reality is, if y'all make us, we can move in now. But we'd literally be displacing some folks who just let go of a long-term lease to move in before all this happened. I'd rather not do that to them. On the long term, this is 5 acres in front of another 20. And I would really like to buy the 15 that flagpoles behind that Watson is selling. And I'm going to make an offer to him to buy the 15 acres back there. In the back 15 is where we'd like to build our house. If I don't have to displace my wife in between, that's the best. The reality is, us not living there doesn't fit the mold of what it's supposed to be. So if I need to move her into that house, if I need to have the Fears move out, and I need to move her into that house and just raise the level of the porch up to, I'm a carpenter, I can make it happen. But if I need to move her in, if that's what it takes to make this board happy, we can.
So let me get it clear in my head here.
Yep, there's a lot.
You're asking us to approve this request tonight, but you're also asking us to give you a 2-month leadway before you moved into the property to make it legal, where it will be a home-based business where you have to live in.
It's probably longer than 2 months because they just got it dried in, but yes.
6 months?
Yeah, they definitely will have that house done in 6 months. Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to make sure I get it clear in my head. So
Any other questions? It's complicated, sounds like.
It is complicated, yeah.
So,
You mentioned that you were not going to be near the amount of work that's being done or has been done in that before, but yet you asked for 8 employees. So what's 8 employees going to do if you're not going to have very much going on there?
So I'm a trim installer and cedar installer, and so it's very normal for there to be 1 or 2 guys there for a couple hours and then shoot off somewhere. It's also very normal for everybody to show up and unload a whole load of cedar, because I don't want 2 guys. So I've got a 16-foot flatbed trailer. I go down to Cedar Direct, pick up a whole bunch of posts and shutters and stuff, because what I use the back part, the biggest part of that shop for, is to dry out all my wood. And so when I bring it, it's sopping wet. They still do it old school. They float down the river, jerk it out of the river, up in Canada, run it through a mill, put it on a truck. It's here within a week or 2 from the time it was in the river. So we sticker it all out and let it dry. And so I don't like to play games with my word. So the reality is, on average, there will be a half a person there if you count all the hours of the day. But every now and then, right now we've got, when I filled this out, we had 5 employees. I hired another one this last week. So now we've got 6. And I asked Doug, I said, hey, Mr. DeMasi, how do I, or maybe it's Danielle, but I said, how do I do this in a high integrity fashion? Because I don't know if you're looking at average or majority. And they just said, well, how many do you think, in the near future, what's the max? And I'm not going to have more than 8 in the near future, so I'll just put 8, and that way there's no eyebrows raised, there's no questions, there's no fear that I'm going to exceed. And if we got to the point where we were more than that, then I'd just be right back here asking for permission. I don't like asking for forgiveness rather than permission. I'd rather get permission up front.
Any other questions? Thank you. You may be seated. We'll open this for a public hearing for anyone who would like to speak on this. Commissioner, always good to have you here. Looks like I'm the only one. This is in your district. Yes,
This is in District 8, and I'm the Commissioner of District 8. And as most of you know right here, I adopt everybody in District 8, and whenever they have situations to come forward, and especially when it's a family situations, as you see what we've got right here. Just as the Jensens have said, and just as his story has told you what he's got going right here, he's called me, as Mr. DeMasi told him to do, that says you need to call your commissioner and tell him what's going on and what's doing there. And as we discussed this, I asked him, I said, well, how does the community feel about what you're trying to do there? And he says, well, we really don't know at this time what exactly. He said, we're primarily learning what's going on right here. And we got talking about it. I said, well, there's generally, I always suggest to the people who are trying to open up a business or whatever is to meet as many people as they can right there, try to have a get-together or whatever. He went way beyond that, I'd have to tell you that. This past Saturday, if you could have been available about lunchtime, you could have gone out there, you could have had hamburgers, hot dogs, pulled barbecue, desserts and everything, and I think everybody in that community showed up. In fact, there were a few there, Jeff, that I know come from other places other than your community, because I've seen them. But just to tell you that I talked to a lot of those people there, and they're okay with it. They're all for it and what's going on there and what he's trying to do. Yeah, it's somewhat of a tangled web when you're trying to figure out what it is, but what I've been impressed with this family is they're trying to do it right. And they're going this direction. You know, we've had so many that have shown up here that have come here asking for forgiveness at and what we're trying to do. They're trying to do it right. This is a business that I think they have found the perfect spot for it. If this had shown up in some of the neighborhoods we have elsewhere within this county, no. But there on Patterson Road, out there in Patterson in particularly, as he said, it's out there. Well, that's what makes it so special. And as a commissioner, I'm all for it, just to let you know.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Close the public hearing. Okay, go ahead. You always have one more question, Doctor. Go ahead.
The second part, I don't know. I can't face everybody. The second part of that timing question is, if I'm able to get that 15 acres in the back, which we'll know here in the next month or two, as I make an offer and Ms. Watson either takes it or doesn't. If I'm able to move her, if I'm able to plan on building a house back there and move her into that house, the question is, can I go way outside the bounds of norm and not occupy that property up to like a year and a half from now, because then I can just move her one time into a new house instead of move her into an intermediary house.
I'll give you my opinion.
Sure.
I'm sitting down here and I done wrote down here what I was wanting to talk about after we got through get ready to make a motion. I'm willing to go 6 months. I think if we go a year and a half, I think we'd be pushing it, the boundaries. I'm willing to go 6 months to help you do that. I'm only one up here, but I think a year and a half may be pushing it.
If you build
being
another
honest.
house, if you build another property, there's going to be some rearranging of property lines and all of that with the two houses. I don't think we need to get into that today.
Anything else?
I think we need to vote on the facts, not speculation down, a year, 2 years down the road. Because if you do acquire it, and saying this, that property's got a lot more value if you get this approved.
Right.
So get ready for your wallet to, get a little empty. But I do think we need to vote just on today and not speculate.
That's fair.
Mike?
You talk about possibly buying the additional property. Are you also going to take care of the drying shed property boundary at the same time?
Thank you for bringing that back up. The question was asked earlier, is that easily be moved? The answer is no. It's poles sunk in the ground. It's not impossible. I can do it. I can move it. The reality is, when Watson sold that property to Mr. Hobegger, he didn't provide access. As Mr. Watson was getting grumpy about the fact that I was operating a business in his old place of business, he texted Ben and said, hey, you need to figure out what you're doing with the driveway because, the driveway to the shop's on my property. So he sold a workshop, and then he sold a workshop, and then 10 months later turned around and said, well, you don't have access to your workshop. And so Ben went ahead and you can't really see in that photo, but there are now 2 driveways going to that shop, and there's 2 road accesses with 2 culverts because one is now defunct because it's on Watson's property and he was being difficult. And so Ben, just to try to pacify the situation, didn't argue about it and just put in a new gravel driveway. The reality is, my standpoint, Mr. Watson and I have had better conversations more recently than we had on the front end. And I'm just going to go to him and say, hey, how about you just deed that part over? Since Mr. Hobegger's already gone through the time and expense and trouble to put in a secondary driveway at your request, how about you just actually include in the land that you already sold and the shop that you built, that the shop that you built is on the land that you sold that it's on, and see what I can't do there.
You've probably shared more information than we really need to know. So, okay. Our public hearing is still on. Anyone else like to speak on this? If you'll come around, please.
I am Ben Hobegger, the current owner of the property that's been working with Jeff, and I just wanted to clear up with the timeline for the fears that are in that house, that are building the house across the street. They have told me that they expect that house to be done mid-January. So with construction, we could probably say mid-February with the way things go. So I think that fits within the 6-month time frame if the board's willing to allow that time frame. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Close the public hearing. It appears that this meets the standards as set forth, and any motion that you want to make on this would include those conditions, like 3 conditions.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the request with the conditions that are set forth by the planning department. Also, that we give a 6-month grace period for the people to move in to the structure there on the property.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mike Curtis,
Yes.
Amber Brown, Jerry Sartain,
Yes.
Gary Farley,
Yes.
Renee Curtis, Zane Cantrell.
Yes. We have one more announcement.
Okay. We are planning a joint training session with the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals. It will be in person sometime in November. A date has not been set, but expect an email in the next couple of weeks with some potential dates. And we will make sure that if you can attend, that it gets recorded so that you can access it to get your training hours.
Yeah, we don't have a date on that yet, but we'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Similar. In November, but where? In this, yes.
Okay. Anything else? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Commissioner, thank you for being here.